nearly there. For some reason, it's taken a bit of time to. Okay. Okay, we're now live.
Okay, thanks, Joe. Well, first thing is if I can ask everybody to mute who isn't muted already. Thank you. Evening members, officers, and any members of the public. Welcome to the last executive of 2020. First item, any apologies for absence?
Thank you, Chairman. I have not received any apologies.
Okay. Minutes of the previous meeting held on the 17th of November. Members of the executive, are you happy for me to sign those? Okay, good, thank you. I'll do that next time I'm in the office. Do we have any declarations of interest of the items we're going to be discussing this evening? That's to everybody, if you want to speak, not just the members of the executive. Okay, fine, thank you. Right, item 4, question of members of the leader. I'm opening the floor. Is there anyone who has a question for me? Nope, that's fine. Okay, moving on. No. All right. Okay. I'm told again that we've got something like 25. Oh, actually, we've got 25 participants, and I can get 25 pictures on my screen, so I can actually see everybody. There is no second screen. All right. Okay. Well, thank you. That's item 4. Oh. And then Councillor Malvaginum arrives and completely changes my screen. Thank you. Okay. Councillor Malvaginum, do you have any question for me at all in this item? I don't want to move on and cut anybody off. No. Okay. All right. Item 5, payback grant scheme. I was approached a couple of months ago by yet another charity that I guess you can only say is close to going under. And they have been around a long time and serve our community very, very well. Hundreds, actually thousands of people use the charity. I don't think it's right that I name the charity here, but they are extremely well regarded in the community and do a fantastic job. That said, their position is that they have less than 10% of the income that they had before COVID, but they've still got something like 80% of the costs to run the organization. And they approached me via another councillor to say that basically the amount of money they had left in the bank was just enough to pay the redundancies and close the charity. And it won't surprise anybody to know that the chair I was talking to, she was close to tears at having put so much effort into this and provided such a fantastic service, and she just couldn't see a way through. We explored any kind of grants that the charity was available for from the government, which unfortunately the only one that they qualified for was the furlough scheme, and they were taking full advantage of that, having their staff on furlough. Even though these are quite low paid staff and they were only getting 80%, they couldn't top it up to the 100. And they were just saying, is there anything else that can be done? And in that discussion, and I looked at their accounts, etc., it was clear that what they needed was what the government were doing for businesses, which they called the bounce back loan, which gave some cash flow to the organization, but more importantly, gave confidence that they could get to the other side. This charity had sufficient funds to last a few more months, which will certainly take them to the other side of the vaccines. But if they decide to do that, they wouldn't have any funds to make people redundant, and that was their big problem. Their staff were their #1 priority, quite right. So I worked with Councillor Lewis and Councillor Hawkins and the finance team to see if there was something we could do that was similar to the bounce back loan. And we came up with what you have in front of you now, which is I'm calling the Payback grant scheme. So a grant that gets paid back. And you can see the rules around that in the annex. But fundamentally, this is a scheme that will give charities that are vital to our community a lifeline to get to the other side. Now, there are limits and there are working rules around that. Some of them are not as strict as they could be in terms of, you know, you must have done this, you must have done that, because frankly, I wanted us to be able to take a relatively flexible approach to saving organizations from going under and helping them get to the other side. Okay, but that's what's before you in terms of the paper now. I'm happy to answer questions as best I can. So I'll open the floor to questions. I do know Councillor Wheeler has written to me on this. So Councillor Wheeler, I'm happy to come to you at some point and go through the points if you raise them. So don't think I'm going to miss you out. Councillor Malvaginam.
Thank you, and thank you, Leader. I'm a bit confused with this whole terminology, payback grant scheme. I mean, grant is a grant. I mean, there's no payback. General grant you give away. I think I feel that if that particular charity you are referring to, you're citing only one charity, maybe there are more than one charity. Maybe we should actually consider giving grants, because why chase charities who are truly struggling? If we as a council believe that charity is worthwhile supporting, we should support it without any strings attached. Maybe it should be if they want to pay back the grant at some other time, they should. I personally don't think the whole concept of this payback grant doesn't make any sense to me. I'm afraid I don't agree with this whole heading, put it that way, okay, and against the concept of it.
Okay, thank you. A couple of things then. No, I mentioned one grant because it's a nice, clear example. Sorry, one charity that approached me, but I've been approached by several that are indicating that they are going to the wall. And I just wanted to use that one example as a nice, clear example of why my thinking was the way it was. I do take your point that a loan or payback grant is not the same as just giving a grant. I think I'm right in saying we, as a borough council, are actually already, I think, extremely generous in how much we allocate. And as you know, Councillor Malvaginam, in the last 4 or 5 months, we've more than doubled that to all of the other grants that we're doing. The issue where I was coming from was that every grant that we do is properly constituted of how we allocate money and how we give it out, and there are criteria that are required to meet it. The point of this one was to say we can't endlessly try and save everybody. If they have the wherewithal to take some temporary help and be able to pay it back, and you'll see that it's paid back over 5 or 6 years. If you take the maximum over 6 years, I think it's something like £600 a month or something. But that's only if they take the maximum. That's why I'm putting it to the executive to offer it. If people can get grants through our properly constituted grant schemes, I have no doubt at all that, first of all, they'll try and go that route. And secondly, we would try and support that. So it's not a case of you can have this loan instead of. If you can get a grant some other way, I'm sure they'll go with that. But I take your point. So any next question? Councillor Bates.
Well, I was going to let Councillor Wheeler come in if she wants to, so because I actually have a number of concerns about this paper, but I will let her go first if she wants, and then I will add the rest.
Okay, having having received Councillor Wheeler's email, I knew that there were going to be several points there. I just wanted to see if there were any others before we get into that, but I'm happy to go to Councillor Wheeler next.
All right.
No, I'm happy to do that. That's okay. Councillor Wheeler.
Thank you, Rodney. Very gallant. Thank you, Leader. Yeah, I did. I mean, I think the first thing I want to say is that we certainly support the concept of supporting voluntary organisations within Surrey Heath. And my view on the majority of voluntary organisations is that the voluntary sector basically provides the services that we can't afford to provide, but we'd like to be able to provide very often at a much lower rate and a lower cost than it would cost us. But as I wrote to you, I do have a number of concerns. Some of them are around the operation of it, should it go ahead, and I will put those to one side because that's something that if the executive support it and vote for it, would come down into the finite detail. Obviously, this sits with the leader and the finance officer. I think there does need to be clarity that is public. We have a lot of criticism as a borough of not being transparent, and I think that there has to be absolute transparency about who we are and we're not supporting. There are comments within the body of the paper that refer to things like of sufficient evidence of genuine risk. And I think there needs to be a greater understanding again and transparency around the clear guidance that sits behind it. And I know that if I was a member of the executive, I'd certainly want to see it. I'd want to know how we're quantifying it. The maximum amount of 50,000 is quite a risk for the council to take. And the leader has already commented that there are a number of organisations that are likely to come forward to try and take advantage of this scheme. And I just wondered whether or not it would be better to have the figure linked to a percentage of previous year's funding to a maximum of 50,000. Essentially, I think what we're heading to here is a loss. And so we should have a quantified maximum amount that the council is prepared to lose in order to support the charities that we see as being necessary to support our residents. And again, picking up on the point that Councillor Malvaganam made earlier, and also conversations that I've had with Councillor Bates last night, that actually if a service is essential, and there is a clarity within this that the service should be deemed as essential, should we not be looking to give a temporary grant in the original sense of the word based on a variance of the KPIs and the SLAs? Because if that service is deemed to be essential, we are going to need to support it. And I'm not sure of the impact in terms of charities reporting, what they have to give to the Charities Commission, etc. But if they are insolvent, their ability to take a loan, albeit a loan from the Borough Council, is still, I think, quite a difficult area for them to be commenting upon. And also it depends on whether or not there's an income stream. Because if it's all down to charitable donations, that's one thing. But if they don't have an income stream, or if they would normally have an income stream, and that income stream is not in existence, how are we quantifying it? And how is it going to come back? And the other thing is that this specifically excludes capital expenditure, whereas the most probable thing is that an organisation that should derail an organisation is the need for a sudden and unexpected capital expenditure. So I had concerns about this. As I said, I did send a really long email to you in the hope that I wouldn't need to go, or you might be able to sort of kick some of these out of the way beforehand. But one of the questions I think that you have answered is that I asked whether or not it came as a result of a specific need for a specific organisation, and I think that stands. That was obviously the factor that put this in. And then my final question was, where would we sit in the hierarchy of creditors? Should our loan not be able to be enough to keep them trading. So 1 or 2 questions, but you did have sight of them all in advance. And I don't know how many extras Councillor Bates will be looking to raise. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I did want you, sorry, I didn't tell you, but I did want you to go through them as per your email. I have had, as I say, chance to read that beforehand, but I know I haven't replied, and I wanted us to have this conversation in public for exactly that reason. Councillor Bates, can I say any points that Councillor Wheeler didn't cover there, or anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, there are quite a few, I'm afraid. And this
Quite a
is
few,
under
okay.
the category of charity law. And Councillor Wheeler is far more polite than I am, because I haven't actually given you advance notice of this, which is in general what I tend to do anyway. So in terms of the charity law position, just to kind of declare, it's a non-interest, but just for background, is that I am a manager of a charity which doesn't operate in the borough. So this is my view based on that experience. It's not the view of the charity. They will have their own views. But there is a need to be aware here of a number of issues around charity law and charity governance. So the first thing that any charity that may be considering this, or indeed a community organisation, is that they have to have within their governing structures, whether it's their articles of association or whatever, the ability to, the power to borrow within it. Otherwise, they won't be allowed to do it in the first place. And any bank, or indeed any council even, would have that as an expectation. Secondly, charities have to be sure that they can repay. So I entirely agree with the point made by Councillor Marbuckingham. You can't call it a payback grant. It is a grant or it's a loan. It's one or the other. You can't, if you're paying it back, it's not a grant. So I think whatever happens, that you do need to change the name, because they are constitutionally and legally very different. I think there's an issue regarding the personal liability of trustees as well, which is a point I did discuss briefly with Councillor Wheeler. So if this is a charity, even though they're a charity, for lending of money, many banks, for example, would ask that the trustees personally guarantee it. If the organisation is an unincorporated body, so they're not a charity, a community group, then that is the law anyway. So the council would need to consider whether or not they would trace trustees under those circumstances. There's also issues as to whether or not the council would have a loan on assets. So, for example, if the charity had a building or something like that, or other assets, would the council therefore put a charge on those assets? And you just need to be aware that may not be allowable by the charity. You may not be aware that the charity bank actually have got a resilience and recovery loan fund, so they're operating something not dissimilar to what you're talking about. It does have higher interest rates, and there are lots of rules around it. And they've made it very clear, you can look it up, it's not appropriate for everyone, and it won't work with all charities or social enterprises. But what they're using it for, and where I would support this, is they're using it if there are delays in payments. So, for example, let's say a charity is guaranteed to pick up some money in 3 months' time because they've got a contract, and the problem is an immediate cash flow problem, and they know that the money is going to come in. I would then say that this would make sense for that. It would, if they've got an increased demand for services, it's allowable. If they're providing working capital until normal business resumes, which is the point you're trying to make, then they do allow that. They also allow, however, this is where again I think you could think, they would consider a grant of the loan if it would otherwise be unviable. So if you're only giving a loan and that wouldn't work for the charity, then they have a grant that would be available linked to that, 20 to 40% of the loan. I'm sorry that sounds quite technical, but there is quite a few, this is what I would describe as a very, very well-meaning idea based on an immediate urgent need. And so I completely understand why everyone's looking at this and thinking we must do something, because I don't know which charity it is or other charities. So we absolutely want to try and address that. But the problem that we have is based on the wording of what you're trying to do. I don't think it can work. And I'm sure you don't mean this. But for example, under point 8, which is my final point, under conditions of the annex, it's being suggested organisations must review any ring-fenced funds within their accounts with a view to releasing them. And the problem is that if they have got, for example, money which is allocated specifically for a grant for a particular capital project, then they won't be able to release that, but because that is already designated. And that's, I can see the argument is, oh, we can move it around a bit, but actually the rules are quite strict and you can't. So I think this does need a bit of thinking through. I would agree with the point made about grants for critical organisations. I know the council's been generous, and you're right to highlight that. But if the organisation is critical to our running as a council, we need to give them a grant or make sure they get a grant through other means. This alone isn't going to be viable, I'm afraid, as well-meaning as this is.
Okay.
Leader, a very quick declaration of interest.
Oh, sure.
I'm a director, treasurer, trustee of a charity in Aldershot, medium-sized charity. I'm fully conversant with all what Councillor Bates had been saying, and I agree with most of what he had said about the charity laws.
Oh, okay, right. Okay, let me try and pick my way through all of that. Okay, all right. First of all, this is not something that just came out of thin air. There are other boroughs and districts that are doing similar things in terms of offering loans to charities. And interestingly, the name Payback Grant came from them doing it. That's what they call it. Okay. As I said to Councillor Wheeler, I'm not. You and Councillor Bates are not the only people who've said to me, shouldn't this just be called a loan? Because that would make it more clear. I'm not emotionally attached to the name of it. What I really, really want it to do is to be as effective as possible. And I am hearing a lot of people saying, shouldn't it just be called a loan? So, yeah, we can discuss that. The charity bank, I spoke at length to the trustees of the charity that I'm talking about, and they have explored everything that they possibly can, including the charity bank, and got nothing from the charity bank. No grant, no loan. As I say, they've looked at all of the government schemes that were available, and the only one they're benefiting from is the furlough one. Okay. In talking to those trustees, and I will say, I don't want to say that they're experts because they're trustees, but in going through this, the Annex A was following several backward and forward discussions with that group of trustees to say, does this work for you? And then they would ask me questions. I would either be able to answer because it was obvious, or I went back to our officers and went through them. And so it isn't a case of this was written, a week ago and it just made the papers. There's been quite a lot of work in behind this, admittedly with the officers and the trustees of one relatively, I'd say, medium-sized charity. Okay. And as I say, there are other boroughs and districts that are doing this. In terms of just working my way up the list, there is no intention that the loan would be secured against assets, and it wouldn't be holding the trustees liable. The reason for that is that in many cases, the assets are either not worth anything, which is in the case of this charity, right? Everything is old, everything is not worth in terms of being able to sell it. And I know that I've checked, but also they've checked to see if there's anything they could sell as an asset to keep going. In terms of personal liability, if we were to hold the trustees personally liable, none of the trustees would take out the loan. It would immediately kill the whole prospect of the loan and keeping them alive. Grant versus loan, I've said. Constitution, Councillor Bates, that's a very interesting point you raise, that their constitution has to be able to take on a loan. All right, and that is something that I think should be in the paper that said, you know, we add that in to say that the Constitution should allow them to take on a loan. The only thing I would say is that in order to give the loan, if that means that they have to get the relevant trustees together and make an amendment to the Constitution, then I would be fine with it. That would tick the box for me. Okay, if they can do that. What I would dread, in all honesty, Councillor Bates, what I would dread is us sitting ready to help them. They're running out of time, and then we say to them, we just need you to jump through all of these hoops. Right? They lose that time, they can't do it, that organisation goes under. It's like somebody's drowning, I'm ready to pull you out of the water into the boat, but I'd just like you to sign this form first. All right, I know exactly what you're saying in terms of, you know, we're trying to do something urgently, but I think the circumstances demand that we move urgently, and this might not be perfect. Okay, in fact, I'll confirm that it isn't perfect, right? But I do take your point that we want to try and make it as workable as possible. If charities are in a position where they cannot take on a loan, then we're not going to be in any way, shape or form trying to force them. Okay. Just, I know that doesn't necessarily give you the perfect answer to all of your points. It's just my answer to your points. Working up Councillor Wheeler's list. List of creditors, where would we be on the hierarchy? Right. Mr. Home has mentioned this to me on several occasions, that this is a soft loan. Right. And as I said, it's unrealistic to think that there will be assets that we are going to be able to secure the loan against. I don't anticipate that we are anywhere in the hierarchy in terms of it getting paid. This is without doubt a risk loan. It's not a secured loan. But again, if we were to give a grant, right, then that's not secured either, is it? That's 100% no chance of getting any payment back. Okay. The other, it's a minor point, but I'll leave that one. Capital expenditure. It's an interesting point, Councillor Wheeler, about capital expenditure. The reason that I put that in was that I didn't want the loan being taken and then they do something like buy a van, okay, and then end up going under, right? I didn't want it to be for capital improvement of the charity. This is a lifeline. This is about them continuing to be able to pay their bills, pay utilities, pay the rent on the building if that's what it is. If they've got people who for some reason cannot take advantage of the furlough scheme, but they're needed to keep the charity running, then this is about that. So it was all revenue, nothing about improving the actual charity, because this isn't what that's about. If they want to improve the charity and they can afford, it's a going concern. There are other grant schemes that they can take advantage of. So that's where that came from. I do take your point that they can go under because of it. But I think the charities that are talking to me is that it's not about, the only emergency that's happened is they've got no income. You know, they've got outgoings, but they've got no income. That's what this is aimed at. I know this, I will give you both a chance, by the way, I can see your faces, so I will give you both a chance to come back when I've gone through the list. Right? The Charitable Commission, right, are they allowed? Okay, that is definitely something that should be checked out, and I think we can help the charities to check that out. If they're not allowed, then we can't give the loan. If we are, then we want to be able to be in a position to do it. I did say they were essential, and I don't mean, I guess it depends on your definition of essential. Is a charity essential? It is to the people who use it quite often, right? Is it essential to the borough council? I'd have to say probably no. Is it essential to the people in Frimley if the charity is in Bagshot? You know, I think it's for me, when I said essential, I meant essential to the people who use it. And I think they do a fantastic job, as the vast majority of charities do, in providing services and things to the community that we don't, either choose not to or can't, for exactly what Councillor Wheeler said. You know, they can do it better and cheaper than we can, and often will do things that we won't. So should it be a grant instead? I go back to, we have umpteen different grants available, and any grants that people are eligible for, then they should do it. If we say we're going to do this, we'd be creating another grant scheme. The question is, what does this grant scheme look like to solve the problem for this charity? Does that work for the next charity? Councillor Dugan? You're on double mute, of course. There you go.
Indeed, I was. No, I don't want to jump in, and I was, or indeed cut across you. Just indicating I'd like to talk at an appropriate.
Sorry. Okay, I thought I was saying something you strongly wanted to correct. I'm almost at the end of Councillor Wheeler's list. Do you know what a maximum pot is? Actually, a very good idea. Right? The 50. It links to the 50,000 maximum. This is not. Let me be clear. It's not meant that a charity that spends £5,000 a year can apply for a £50,000. I nearly called it a payback grant there, right? They can't apply for a £50,000 loan. The reason we put 50 was because there's some charities that we already grant 80,000 to. Right? It was to give a number that was workable. This particular charity has asked for 30. Right? Another charity that I'm talking to has asked for 15. Right? So it's what they see. They don't want to take on a massive debt. They want to take on the minimum that would see them through to the other side. Okay, so it's not meant that everybody, like, you know, the bounce back loan from the government, you could get up to 50 grand. And I believe something like 97% of loans were 50 grand. All right, that's not how this one would work. It's a case of, we would go up to a maximum, but that has to be a maximum in line with what the charity is actually doing. Okay. And your last point there, I think, or your first point, was sufficient risk be defined. That's an interesting one to say how. The charity actually said maybe we should say there's only X number of months left of money. But I think we can define that if they're at sufficient risk or not by looking at their accounts. I think a couple, I might have missed them, Councillor Wheeler. One was in your email about what if somebody springs up out of nowhere? They've been going 3 months and suddenly they want a £50,000 loan. I think that's covered by the fact that we would look at their books in the past and see that they had sufficient income to be able to cover a loan going forward, the repayments. Okay, and there was one more which I didn't note down, but I know I haven't answered, which I'll come back to when I remember it. Okay, right. I'm sure that didn't answer every one of your questions sufficiently. Okay, so let's go back to Councillor Bates, and then we'll go back to Councillor Wheeler.
Well, I was actually going to allow the deputy leader, who has sat patiently, and rather than listening to me again, which he may not necessarily want to do, I was going to let him go first.
Okay, he is very, very, helpful tonight, isn't he? That's fantastic. Thank you. Okay, Councillor Dugan.
Yeah, I'm always happy to listen to you, Councillor Bates, as well. You know. I agree with some of the pushback, actually, to be fair. I just wanted to sort of clarify a few things. I mean, to one of the points that Councillor Malvagan made, not all charities are the same. Some of them are sitting on huge sums of money and don't really need to borrow anything. And if you just make a scheme that says, put your paw up and the borough council will, throw money at you, isn't a wise scheme. We typically have two different grant schemes at the moment. We have a community grant scheme and what we call a revenue grant scheme. The community grant scheme's rules really are that it's got to be for a capital project. So that makes, or as an avenue for charities to come to where they want to spend or buy something, as they always have been able to. The revenue grant scheme, in all honesty, I think is the one probably that the charities most value, because it allows them to spend money on operational costs, and not all charities allow that. But that's covering the problem that you have, articulated, that they need money to pay for stuff, even if it's just, really low level wages to employees, or, rent rates and all the rest of it, the other stuff that you mentioned. And therefore, I think it's got a good value. I take the point about whether it's a loan or not, totally get the point about charities may not be set up to even be allowed to take a loan, which kind of brings me to the point really that I wanted to make. I want to make 2 points really. I think we should, and whether we do it through this paper or whether we have to do it, bring another paper back, but we should open up the community grant scheme through 2021 and allow many more, not bites at the cherry, but funding cycles in the council. If my memory serves me right, we've got that battened down to 2 tranches a year. So even if, if we, and I think we've just been through one of them, so you're 6 months away pretty much from being able to get a community grant right now, which, we need to be moving at pace because the virus has moved at pace, and we should make it clear that that grant scheme is opened up and that we will do it every blinking executive if we need to. I don't know what the draw on officer time would be for that, but being sensible, let's see if we can get more cycles of the community grant scheme. That covers off the capital aspect. The operational aspect and the whole idea of this being a loan, I would sort of, I hark back in my mind to the high street shop front scheme that we put in. We made that scheme as easy as it could possibly be for people to apply for. And it's taken us 3 years or however long it's been to get about 8 grants approved, because whilst it was dead easy, or it was as easy as it could possibly be, it didn't meet the needs of people with shops. Now, I guess the point I'm trying to make is if this scheme as published is and we just go ahead with it as is, if we don't get any applications in 2 months from these charities who we already have knocking at your door, we've got the scheme wrong. And we need the ability to change it in flight so that we can get it right and give money to charities where they have a pressing need for operational revenue. So I'm okay with it right now, because at the end of the day, if we don't put a loan scheme out, we're going to have to find another pot of money, which we, Mr. Hone will, we'll have to have more sleepless nights about. So I say, let's try the loan scheme, but if it doesn't work, let's recognize, I think, across all parties, we want to do and support these charities. You often use a phrase which I quite like around charities. They're money multipliers. We give them money and they do far more with that money than we ever could, because they've got volunteers, because they don't pay people so much, they don't have the burden of overheads like we have as a council. So as I say, my 2 recommendations, and I don't know what the process is. I'm sure Mr. Payne or Mr. Passion will tell us whether or not we can just add a line about opening up the cycle on the community grants. And that, as I say, if we go for a loan scheme here, which I still think is a good idea, it's the right place to start. If it proves to be wrong quickly, let's change it and make it a grant scheme.
Good, thank you. Okay, let me just go to Councillor Josephine Hawkins, because it's her portfolio for the frequency of the community grant thing. Councillor Hawkins, in terms of the suggestion about, I think, is it right we do it twice a year?
Yeah, so community grants are twice a year. We didn't have many people, I think there's only 2 organisations applied this time, which is disappointing. But I think because of COVID, there has been that many other things. We've had the COVID grant, and we have been helping charities, quite a lot, sort of with all the different things. And the revenue grants will be coming up very shortly. I had a meeting today, but yes, you're correct. The community grants are coming up. I think the next lot, I think it's January, it goes to the executive, the revenue grants, but the community grants are twice a year. We only did one, I think it was about a month, 6 weeks ago. So there will be another one coming. I think it's around June, the next one will be, but it is publicised, and I think we need to point people in the direction to say, there is help there, and the council is happy to give it. And there is I can't remember what the exact sum is now, but there is not an insignificant sum of money for people to apply for. It doesn't increase, so the pot is going down all the time. But there is quite a chunk of money there, but people need to apply.
And you're happy with the idea that we can increase the frequency of when we review grants rather than doing it every 6 months? Could we do it quarterly?
We could do that. I mean, the whole grant scheme is coming, I believe it's in February, to the executive. So there's going to be a review of all the grants then. And then I think we can look at it, with the whole lot of the grant scheme. So I think maybe we can look at it then and decide, which way we're going to go. Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you. All right. Okay, Councillor Edward Hawkins and then Councillor Malvaginam, and I haven't forgotten about Councillors Wheeler and Bates. Yeah.
Thank you, Leader. Ignore my raised hand. I agree with a lot of what's been said, especially by Councillor Bates. The scheme name, we've flogged that to death. One of the areas that did concern me was trustee liability, and I would like to see that in the rules written in stone. I am slightly wary of the law of unintended consequences on this, and I totally support what we're trying to do. I think it's absolutely right, and it's a big but. I'm just going to throw some questions. I don't expect an answer now because some of them are a bit sort of left field. Sorry, Rodney. One point is we're talking about other grants. We have lots of pots available in other grants. We've got, there's Miss Gom's Trust. I think I've been asking for some time for these grants to be looked at, these pots to be looked at. Are they doing anything? I mean, the one that really annoys me is the mutual insurance grant, or the fund of money there. There's over £100,000 in that and things like that. But there's all sorts of 6,000 here and 10,000 there that we should be looking at to see if we can utilize this, because this is for the good of the community, and this is an opportunity to really get to grips with that. Question: does our constitution allow us to make grants? Question: how do we meet with SIP for rules on this, and what would our auditors take of it? I would hate this to come back to one of Councillor Malvanigan's committees to be savage because it hasn't met the approval of the auditors. I don't think I could live through that committee meeting. These are the and the other thing, I hear what Councillor Dugan is getting at. He's absolutely right, but it's revenue. I suppose I'm nervous about offering people a revenue grant, and they may say that they can rely on that because revenue does mean ongoing sums. And I think this is where we've almost got to be very careful that we don't unfairly raise the hopes and expectations of the staff who do. And Councillor Dugan was absolutely right. Charities can do so much more, so much better, far more efficiently than a council can do. And that is something that just gets me sort of slightly twitchy on the ongoing revenue idea. It's not a grant, it's not a one-off. Is there a way we can deal with that revenue, support the staff, but not give them the feeling that this is ongoing all the time, because at some stage we may have to let the staff down, and that to me would be a crime.
Yeah, I agree.
Sorry,
So
it's fairly blunt, but
just
I
taking those
think
then.
those are my points. Thank you.
Yeah,
Leader.
sure. Okay. Just taking those. Mr. Hone looked into this thoroughly. Okay, and I will just get him to confirm, and hopefully he will. Our constitution definitely allows us to make loans. SIPFA, I can't imagine the auditors are going to have a problem if we're saying that, but I just want to just check with Mr. Hone. Are you happy that is, I'm saying what's correct?
Yeah, I think through you, Chairman, thank you. I think it's actually mentioned in the report, but we are allowed to make loans, and we are allowed to make loans at below the market rate. That's, as Leader, you already referred to it as what's known as a soft loan. The difference between the rate at which we lend out and the rate we could have lent out, the going rate, we have to account for that as an annual cost. Now, the level of sum that we're looking at advancing, it's not a significant amount, but it certainly does have to fall onto the council's, effectively what you would know in the private sector as a profit and loss account, what we call as an income and expenditure account, and has to be identified in the year. So it's very explicit, and in our balance sheet, those loans sit separately from our other investments and so forth. So that is, it's quite clear and transparent in our books, and it is a legitimate use of council funds.
Thank you. Okay. Right. Okay, I've got quite a lot of notes here in terms of that. Councillor Malvaginam, and then I'm definitely going to come back to Councillor Bates, Councillor Wheeler, and then I'm going to, forgive me, but I'm going to bring it to a close and we're going to make a decision.
Thank you, Leader. I actually agree with Councillor Dugan. I mean, there is an option. I would skip this entire loan option now and immediately get the officers to work on the grant schemes, to actually increase the grant schemes, because there's another aspect, a human aspect to this. The charity we may be willing to give the money to the charity. Charity may comply with the rules, and we could be complying with the rules. If they are unable to pay, I do not want to see the charity's name in a bad debtors list, which I'm sure we all do look at these things. And that would be so embarrassing for the charity and for the council and for the community. I really would not go down this road. That's my recommendation to the exec for if to take it or not. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Wheeler.
Unless
of course you'd like to let Councillor Bates go next, I don't know.
Nah.
No. Right. I did remember the last one. So I did remember the last one, by the way, which is your point about ring fenced, which I'm happy to come back to.
Okay.
But
and actually, just a point of clarity. The point that I made wasn't that a charity had just sprung up like the government loans and was asking for thousands and we were going to give it. It was the fact that because within the report you ask for 2 years accounts, if a charity has been operational for 18 months and is looking for a small loan, it was more the concern that they shouldn't be precluded from this if this is the route that you're intending to take. I actually would like to come back to a point that Councillor Dugan made, and it seems eminently sensible to be able to reopen up the grant scheme, and then just as the charity is going to have to work on repaying the loan in 12 months' time, we set the expectation, as I know we always do, that no grant is guaranteed ad infinitum, but we set the expectation that any grant that we might have given to that charity after 12 months is likely to be reduced until the balance of the emergency grant, or whatever you wanted to call it, is actually settled. Because that's essentially what we're doing. We're going to give them a loan. They're going to pay back the loan with the money that we give, on a reducing basis on our next grant that we give them. So it seems kind of sensible to accept that that's what's happening, not risk them going on a debtors list and say, okay, fine, we will give you an emergency grant. You are effectively borrowing against a future grant. And what we will do is work with you to look at additional self-fundraising mechanisms and other grants that you can apply for until this amount has been paid back over such and such a rate. And that seems to me to get round the loan option, to get sort of round the grant option, to get around the bad debtor list, and would seem to take the spirit of what you're trying to do and put it into a very easy format.
Yeah, I guess that the slight thing is that two things, I guess. First of all, that we don't give a grant to every single charity in the borough, right? Whereas this is something that would be open to them. And secondly, each grant the following year, say, or even the next 2 years, if we give 20 grand a year and we cut the 2 years, say, down to 10 because they wanted £20,000 advance grant, the second year and the third year are not necessarily guaranteed that we would do it. But I do take your point. Okay. Right, Councillor Bates.
Yes, thank you. I still think, I'm afraid, there's some areas that haven't really been clarified. And if I take paragraph 1.5 for starters, what I heard you say, and perhaps I misheard you, was that this was going to be open to every charity. Well, that is not what it's saying under one. It really comes down to whether the council considers essential. That's what the definition of essential is. It's not whether individuals themselves think it's essential or whether service users think it's essential. It's whether the council themselves consider this to be essential in carrying out work that the council considers to be important, i.e. is within our corporate plan or serving some wider need that would otherwise not be addressed or would cost us more to address. So
yeah, sorry, Councillor Bates. I know I misspoke. I didn't mean that every single charity in the borough could apply for a loan. What I meant was you don't have to have had a grant from us before to apply for the loan. So you're right. It has to be essential. Yeah.
Okay. So again, it comes back to this point, which I think has been well made by others, that if this is essential, it should be a grant. And the second aspect of this, which is relevant, is I take on board what you said about it being, if you like, an unsecured loan. So it's a loan that we would like to get the money back if we can, but don't worry too much if you can't. I mean, it's not quite what you're saying, but that we're not going to go after individual trustees. We're not going to go after your assets. So it's been described as a soft loan. Now, that may be more attractive to charities for the reasons you've outlined, but there's still going to be an issue, which is regarding the accounting of that, which I'm sure Councillor Mulvagon will be able to explain more than me. But in essence, it still goes into the Charity Commission accounts as a debt and as a loan. So the issue that then arises is it would then impact in terms of future income that they may try and get. So, for example, they try and get around this by applying for new grants. Part of the issue is that they wouldn't be able to get a grant for repaying of debt. I don't know any income stream or grant trust that would actually allow that. So it then presents an inadvertent further problem that it may actually impact on their income stream going forward, which again is not what we're trying to do at all, but is an issue. So it really is whether it comes back to this fundamental point: is this a grant or is it a loan? If it is a repackaged grant, that in effect we then say, actually, this part is a grant, but we may come back and if your financial situation improves, then we may ask for the money ask for it to be repaid. Then in essence, that is a slightly different arrangement. That's kind of going back to what Councillor Wheeler was saying. But from a legal point of view, it is whether it is a loan in your account, which then impacts on the charity going forward. Charities can apply for loans. There's not a problem about that, but they may have to change their own constitutions or articles of association before doing so. That's the point. They can't just take up a loan unless that is actually specifically in there, or unless you change your scheme. But regardless of that, they still have to, as trustees, legally are obliged to ensure that they can repay the loan if it is a loan. And this is why I'm sorry to labour this point, but it is absolutely fundamental as to whether it is a loan or whether it is a grant. If it is a loan, they have to guarantee they can repay it.
I can clarify that for you. Okay, it is definitely, without doubt, a loan. Okay, I know there's some confusion because it's called a payback grant, right? But it is definitely a loan. There's been a suggestion that instead of this, we scrap this and we just give better grant schemes. Okay, but the paper that's before the executive to vote on is, to all intents and purposes, other than its name currently, is that it's a loan. And you're right about future, you know, it may jeopardize future income, but the people I'm talking about, us helping, won't have any future income if they don't make it to the other side of this COVID crisis. And this is just another tool for them to perhaps use to get to the other side. Okay, and I agree. And to be honest with you, Councillor Bates, we all know, all right, that where we're at. If we do this loan to one charity and they get to the other side, there may well be a discussion that happens that says, right, we've gotten to the other side. Okay, we only the tool that we put in place as per the trial that this is talked about, it's a 12-month thing only, 2021. There's only one took us up on it. Why don't we approach that charity and say we're prepared to turn that into a grant, and it's done and it's there. You know, this is a tool that it's up for the charities whether they want to use it or not. I think it's coming across to me somehow that in some ways we're trying to force people to take loans. Right?
No.
Of course, people would rather have free money in terms of grants. Of course they would. But there's obviously restrictions on the fact that we can do that. But sorry, anyway, carry on, Councillor Bates.
Sorry, yeah, just in conclusion, because I appreciate you want to move on. But the point is not that no one, you're not forcing people to take up loans. It's whether the charity themselves decide how they wish to continue or don't wish to continue. That's a matter for them. But the issue that they do have, which is a legal obligation for trustees, is that they must be able, if it's a loan, which you've clarified, it's not a grant, so they need to repay that, and they have to then show how they will repay that. And the only way they can legitimately do that is if there's a guarantee on future income. So i.e. if they have got a grant coming through in a couple of months' time that they will get, but they just need to tie that over, that is legitimate use. But if it isn't, and what you've outlined, I say I have no idea who the charity is, and it's not right for reasons you've mentioned to go through that. But if the issue is that in effect they have run out of money and they're not able to continue, and that in essence they don't have any future guaranteed income, then I can't see that. I would struggle to understand that the trustees could legally accept the loan anyway, and that's part of the issue I have. This is it's right that you're trying to save charities. I get that.
All right, and I do have a lot of sympathy for that. I only disagree with one thing you've said there. In terms of guaranteed income is what you need in order to take on a loan. Okay. This charity had income of over £3,000 a week. £3,000 a week. I nearly said a day. £3,000 a week coming in income. All right, and they're at the point where they've got only a few months left of cash in the bank, and their income now is £150 a week or something. It's next to nothing. There is absolutely every reasonable expectation that when the virus passes, whether it's a vaccine or whatever, when it passes, the community will go right back to using that. The clubs will start back up again. I'm saying too much because it's starting to indicate who the charity is, right? Their income, I have every expectation, as do the charity trustees, that their income will come back again. It will take time, but they should get back up to the level that they were before. They had a surplus, and they would expect to be able to pay the loan back, whatever the loan portion is that they actually take. Okay, I think we've all had a good discussion about this. All right, if I may, there are points that I think are definitely worth taking on, and I'll put this to the executive. The ones of my 25 notes here, in no particular order. If the officers could, who am I talking to who's jotting down the amendments that I'm about to propose?
Thank you, Chairman. I'll get the amendments down. So yeah.
Right, thank you, Rachel. Okay. Right, so one of the good ones was it should be explicit that this loan is not expected to be held on personal liability of the trustees. That should be explicit. It's our intention. And so we should state that in the rules. Okay, it should be stated that their constitution allows them to take a loan. Okay, it should be stated that in taking the loan, they are confident, I think, that it is in no way contravening the Charitable Commission rules. All right, it doesn't need to be written, but we would work with them to make sure that we help them to be able to take the loan if they can. Okay. I actually, it was just glanced over, but Councillor Wheeler, but I think you made a good point in terms of there being a maximum pot. One of the things that, just as you were going through that, I guess there's a fear that what if we get 50 charities all looking for 50 grand? You know, that's a gigantic sum of money. I'm happy to propose a pot that if it gets used up, we can come back and ask for more, or just say that's enough. And I would say that the pot would be something like 150,000. Right, no more than that. That's the kind of the maximum that we would be prepared to use up in this trial, and that would obviously limit our exposure, not to individual loan, but to that. And the final one, I think I've heard enough arguments that this should be called a loan and not a payback grant. Okay, so I would also propose that we, unless anybody's got a better idea, maybe we call it a community loan. I'm happy for anybody's got better at marketing than me in terms of what they would call it, but I think community loan is a reasonable name. We have community grants, and now we've got a community loan scheme if it goes through. So, okay, I know this doesn't satisfy every single argument, but I honestly believe we should put this program in place to be another tool for people getting to the other side. Perhaps I am being influenced by having talked to the charities, and they're looking for ways to take as little of the loan as possible. Not coming at it from the point of view, how great, this is a fantastic chance to get hold of cash. They were so grateful that they could get their hands on some cash to see them through this temporary period, and they had no doubts at all they could pay it back when they got to the other side. So that's really where I'm coming from. It may not be perfect, but that's what I'm proposing. Okay, so I'm asking the members of the executive, with those amendments to the paper that you see before you, are you happy to make this recommendation or resolve this? Okay. Okay, thank you. Okay, right. That takes us to, where are we almost at the needing the break time? Because now that we've finished the first item on the agenda. All right. I think you said that it might be an idea to have the screen break at an hour. We started at 6, it's 7:05, and we're about to launch into 3 financial papers. And I know Councillor Lewis is chomping at the bit to go through these in detail with you. Right. So why don't we have our 5-minute break? It's 7:05 now. We'll come back at 7:10. Okay, thank you. 1, 2. Okay, I think people are rejoining. Okay. The next item on the agenda is item 6, the mid-year performance report. This is a snapshot of how we're doing in terms of mid-year. And we always have a report which comes from the officers, which gives us all of our KPIs and how we're doing against them. As with often is the case, there'll be some discussion around whether something has been deliberately postponed because of COVID or it's delayed. Delayed is an unfortunate term if it's just seen as it's being behind, when in actual fact it's a conscious decision. But this is a snapshot of how we are doing against our KPIs, and we are open for comment. Okay, so I'll open the floor to anyone who wants to comment on the report. I think we are being asked, resolve that the mid-year report and observations from the Performance and Finance Scrutiny Committee be noted. So are there any questions on this report? Okay. What I would say is that I don't need to remind you, members, of what kind of a year this has been. And I was very pleasantly surprised to see that we had achieved actually a number of the targets, when in actual fact so much of officers' time has been directed quite rightly at dealing with the crisis. Okay, so I was very happy to see that. If there are no comments, then I'll just ask that the executive note the report. Okay, happy to do that. Okay, thank you. All right. Item 7, Councillor Lewis, this is your paper.
Make sure I'm unmuted. Thank you. Yeah, this is the council finances as of the 30th of September 2020. It's here to provide the executive with a high-level view as the financial performance for the second quarter of 2020-21, and note proposed additions or amendments to the 2021 capital programme. It's been a challenging and unprecedented year so far, making it difficult to draw any conclusion as to the outturn at the end of the year, except to predict at this stage for an overall overspend for the year. The table at paragraph 2.1, which is effectively a summary of the information in Appendix A to this report, predicts an overspend at the end of the year of 1.4 million. With regards to the capital budget, changes to the capital budget are detailed in paragraphs 2.2 to 2.6. And in summary, we're being asked to note an increase of 750k to the 2021 capital programme in relation to Surrey Heath's contribution to the upgrading of the Meadows roundabout, which will be included in the 21-22 capital programme. We're also being asked to agree a proposed transfer of £7,000 residual budget relating to disabled access at London Road Rec to the London Road Rec playground improvement budget following completion of the disabled access project. We are being asked to note that a proposed increase of £139,000 to the Watchett's tennis court capital budget be included in the 21-22 capital programme. So subsequent detailed investigation has found the playing surface requires far more structural repairs than the original quote took into account. This is all detailed in Appendix B. Also been asked to note a proposed capital project of £28,000 for the installation of a wheelchair swing at Frimley Lodge Park, as that is also detailed in Appendix B. With regards to Treasury Investments, the Council currently has 11.7 million in cash investments and 170 million in borrowings. Based on the advice of the Council's Treasury advisors, 53 million is made up of longer-term loans from the Public Works Loans Board, and the remainder being shorter-term loans from other local authorities. Debtors, Section 3 gives details of our sundry and housing benefit debts. We've got 3.7 million in sundry debts as detailed in paragraph 3.1. We have £537,000 of housing benefit debt as detailed in paragraph 3.2. We've been asked to resolve that the Council's financial position on 30th September 2020 be noted. The £7,000 residual budget relating to disabled access London Road Rec be transferred to London Road Rec playground improvement budget following completion of the disabled access project. And to note the draft corporate capital programme 21-22 be agreed by the council in February 21 to include items on Meadows Roundabout project and the increase to the Watchet's tennis court capital budget. We have the option to agree, not agree, or make alternative suggestions in relation to the proposed transfer of the residual budget for disabled access at London Road Rec. Thank you.
Get off mute. Right, I've got a quick question, but I'm happy to open it up. And I'd also Councillor Jennings Evans. I'm sure there was, I think I heard in there, did I hear £139,000 for additional? Where was it? It was the tennis courts, Councillor Lewis.
Watchet's tennis courts, yeah.
Watchet's, okay. I just asked Councillor Jennings Evans about that. But right, yes, question. Councillor Galliford.
Thank you. I'm quite disturbed by this paper because looking at item 2.1, the table on page 36, can someone please explain to me on the second line corporate how £1,771,732 minus £1,771,650 comes to minus 82,000. I don't know who added that up, but as I say, I'm extremely disturbed because I'm not an accountant, but I don't believe that maths adds up.
Right, I don't actually, I will throw it to Councillor Lewis in a second, but I don't, it does give that impression, doesn't it, Councillor Galliford, that if you look at the budget and you look at the outturn, there should be that variance is the arithmetic of those two. If you were worried by that one, okay, the question I was going to raise was look at the investment and development. Minus 600k versus plus 600k, 1.5 million.
Well, I was going to go on, but I thought I'd open.
Sorry. Okay. Well, why don't we try and nail all those down? All right. I'm sure I could ask Councillor Malvaginam, but I'm actually going to ask Mr. Hone, right? And then I'll come back to it. Okay, Mr. Hone.
Yeah, thank you. Through you, Chairman.
Yeah,
through you, Chairman. Yeah, perhaps it should have been made a little bit more clear. What we do is we look at the expenditure to date, and this is a snapshot to the end of September. And you know, for certain budgets where the spending and the income is even every month throughout the whole year, then you would simply say, well, if it's a certain number at the end of September, you just double that to the end of March. And for many of the areas under consideration and set out in the appendix, that is the case. But for a couple, that's not the case. Actually, we think the losses will either the losses will be greater in the second half of the year than they are to the end of September. So that's the reason why I think, in fairness, you know, as I drafted the report, I should have made that clearer. But it's not a simple arithmetic, because there are certain areas where, unfortunately, we think that the financial position is going to deteriorate further in the second half of the year than it has to the end of September, and that's the reason why there is a difference. Some of them are just straight arithmetical, saying, well, it's whatever it was at the end of September, double that, and that will be what it will be at the end of March 2021. But for a couple of items, that's not the case. Thank you.
Well, I agree with Councillor Galliford's point that I have to say, as a table for passing, you know, information, all right, it's come up quite a bit short in terms of, because it's every other table I've ever looked at that looks like that. You would take one from the other and end up with the arithmetical number. Okay, so can we just take it on board for going forward, that if there's something like this, it needs to be broken down a bit more so that it actually shows what the variance would be. Okay, Councillor Malvaginam and then Councillor Bates.
Thank you, Leader. I mean, this came to the PNF meeting on the 25th of November. We went through this, and I had a suggested to the exec
I can't be that lucky.
It's the Bisley Power Cut Brigade.
It's the Bisley Power Cut, is it? I tell you what we're going to do is I'm going to, Councillor Malvaginam, I'm really sorry, but we lost you there. It looks like we might still be losing you. Okay, what I'm going to do is, right, I'm going to go to Councillor Bates, and then if Councillor Malvaginam's digital gets sorted, then we'll go back to him. So Councillor Bates.
Yeah, it's almost as if the leader was smiling there. I'm sure that was completely inadvertent and not at all an early.
I'm just generally a happy disposition.
Absolutely, yes. Look, I'm pleased that Councillor Gansford raised that point. It's not just those two areas; it's also the community services as well. It does seem rather odd that if I take the corporate one that she's mentioned, the actual difference in money is £82, but the variance is 82,000. So that does seem rather coincidental that kind of has occurred. But maybe that is just one of those things. The other point I did want to raise was, well, 2 points actually. One is obviously to note the considerable issue regarding the investment and development budget. And in essence, it says 1.5 adverse variance. It's currently 1.2 and rising, so it probably will be 1.5 by the end. In terms of the rental situation, I won't steal Councillor Mulvaggenham's thunder in terms of what he might wish to say on that, because I suspect that's probably what he wants to comment on. But I do want to kind of flag up that how much this is going to be an issue going forward. I do note that it is higher than the national picture of 19%, but nonetheless 59% is substantially lower than what anybody thought it would be when we made that decision, and I'm sure that he will look into that in due course. The wider point I wanted to make was regarding the Watchetts tennis courts, which I can remember coming up at this committee a while ago, and actually being supportive of that at the time. But I think there's a problem here in terms of how we make these sorts of decisions, because if I look at the end of that paragraph, it says the contractor was not engaged prior to the initial report.
Sorry, Councillor Bates, can you just give us the paragraph number?
Yeah, so it's page 43 in Annex B that Councillor Lewis referred to. So it's the top paragraph. It starts, so it's page 43, Annex B, and it says the contractor SFPAD were not engaged prior to the initial report due to associated cost and the desire not to spend any money until there was an indication from members that this was a project the council was prepared to fund. And I guess as a member, to some degree, I would look at it the other way around. Members can only make a decision if they know what the money is going to be. And what appears to have happened here, for whatever reason, I'm not the portfolio holder, it'd be helpful. I think you've already asked the portfolio holder to comment on it, is there seems to have been some kind of misunderstanding or something may have occurred where, in essence, members made the decision without knowing the full information that was available. And I'm not quite sure how that has happened, because to suddenly be asked for a very large amount of money for this is a concern. And I'm sure that you may have expressed that privately. I suspect you were alluding to it in your initial comment. But whenever we make decisions, I think we have to do it on the understanding of what the full cost may be. And even if members then decide they don't want to spend any money, then obviously that's their decision. But this seems a bit unsatisfactory. I'm sure there's good reason. It'd be helpful to know what it is.
I definitely take your point, and perhaps now's the right time to bring it, Councillor Jennings-Evans. Councillor Mulvaggenham, I know you kind of got cut off there. I will come back to you. Okay, but Councillor Jennings-Evans, just on this point about the fact that Councillor Bates is making the point that I know you raised with me and with Councillor Lewis, a very similar vein. Do you want to just take us through your thinking, please?
By all means, thank you, Leader. And actually, Rodney, I am in complete agreement with you. I am aware from the team that SFPAD weren't engaged prior to the initial report due to the associated cost and the desire not to spend any money until there was an indication from members that this was a project that the council was prepared to fund. But you are quite right, and I'm in complete agreement that this has in effect led to a huge discrepancy in what this project will actually cost, and that concerns me greatly. You're quite right. I mean, we shouldn't be in a position where there is such a massive gap between what we've initially thought the project was going to cost of 135,000 to a potential of 274,000. This is, as a backstop, you must understand that this is because the subcore has found to be substantially insufficient for what would be considered a modern court construction. However, I do not want to see this project fail because we have failed to actually ensure that we knew the exact costs and perhaps didn't get all the information that we need to ensure that we costed it correctly for council to be able to make the correct decision. And I don't want to see our residents not receive what very much authorities are being encouraged to provide easy and accessible sports and leisure facilities, and especially where we're considering mixed use to fulfill needs in our communities for sports such as netball. And I would hate to see this fail because we got this so very wrong on its pricing. And I would encourage the team to go back and ensure that we get absolute figures from sports facility planning and design, and also seek alternative options from other contractors to see if we can find a more cost-efficient way of delivering this project.
Can I just throw in something that it seems odd to me, and maybe I'm just not understanding, but it seems like we self-estimated. You know, we had enough experience in-house to say, right, we think it'll be 135k to do this. Can we have it? We said yes. All right. Then we didn't want to use SPAD or something because they cost money. I guess they're a contractor who specify tennis courts and building them, etc. And they're going to give us a charge. I mean, in the outside world, what you would do, I guess, is you'd go out for 3 contractors to come in and say how much to do this. I wouldn't pay for that estimate from the contractor, right? And then I would see what the deal was on the 3 quotes. And then I would pick whichever one based on quality, price, and usual criteria. We seem to be saying, we thought it'd be 135 grand. We're now saying it's 274. And the only reason that we didn't get a contractor in is because it would have cost us. I'm just wondering why we didn't go down the route of just getting a normal contractors to come in and say how much to do this.
Yeah, I would agree with you on that. My understanding is that there were passing conversations on the actual initial consultation with SFPAD, but they weren't actually employed to do the report. But they did passing site visits, and also chats were had with the LTA. So if Ben or Daniel wanted to come in here and explain why we didn't take a wider approach to this, I'd be interesting to hear.
Yeah, because it's not fair that the officers can't come in and comment until we invite them in. And I was just going to do that.
I think that would be only fair.
Right. It's not right that we're sitting here going, this is terrible, without actually hearing from the people who do it. And I hate to say it, but 9 times out of 10, they usually put me right anyway. So
yeah, and there may be justifiable reasons why this has occurred.
So whichever officers you feel are the right ones to be my guest.
So that would be either Ben or Daniel, whoever wishes to come in, or both.
Daniel's chomping at the bit. We'll have him.
Not chomping at the bit. Ben's not actually here, so I'm here. I agree with you to a certain extent. This is unusual. This is unusual for us to come with this level of extra requested funding, and there have been some oversights. We were working very closely with the LTA on all of our tennis courts. They came in and did a full audit about 2 years ago. And as the leader will know, we recently resurfaced the London Roads tennis courts. They didn't require this level of work. And we did do some, as the annex say, we did do some high level assessments of the cost at the time. And that wasn't in complete isolation. It wasn't just using in-house staff. This was the figure that was arrived at, and that was in consultation with the LTA. Subsequently, they then suggested that we bring in this, and we did bring it to the council. We requested the funding, and it was agreed. Then we did this more detailed work, and it's one of those situations where on closer and detailed investigation, they are in a much worse condition than we envisaged. Now, this quote is from the consultant, not from a contractor. It's worst case. It's top of the range. As you quite rightly say, through procurement rules at this level of cost, we'd have to go out to tender anyway, and we'd hope that through that process we'd get a much better deal in terms of cost. But this is just really a request for the capital funding to be made available in the event of needing to do that. But if you'd rather hold on and we go and do that tender work first and then come back with a request for the extra funding, I'm happy to do that. It's just going to delay process a little bit more. That was all.
I'm going to go back to Councillor Jennings Evans because it's her portfolio. But I tell you what, Daniel, that's a tough sell, you know, for the amount of work you're talking about to go to nearly 300 grand, right? You know, when we were looking at 139, it's So sorry,
if I could come in here, my preference, Daniel, would be to put this on hold until that work has been done. As I said, the last thing I want to see happen is for this project, for much needed leisure facilities for our residents, fails because of this massive increase in costs. So I think we need to go out to tender, and I think we need to get the right costs and the right information that council can make the decision to support this project.
Good. Okay. And I completely understand your view, Councillor Jennings Evans, particularly as it's your portfolio and you want the best for the residents. This is against a background where we've just seen a paper that said we're going to be £1.5 million short this year in our income.
Oh, yeah.
So, you know, Daniel, that's going to be some paper. Okay. Right. Any other questions on this paper? Yes, Councillor Malvagan. I'm sorry, I should have come back to you. Yes.
I did see a smile when my internet went down. So
no. I'm just.
No, it's fine. I can live with that. What I have to tell you, Leader, is this paper came to PNF on the 25th of November.
Yes.
And rightly so, Councillor Galliford and I in particular, and Councillor Galliford also highlighted that there are adding errors to me, not to the council. I was very polite to the finance exec to say, please try and get this sorted and tabulate every single variance in the hope that they'll catch all the adding up errors. I mean, this is embarrassing, to be honest. Yeah, seriously embarrassing. Leave that to aside. So my real problem here is that this document should not have been presented here. We thought PNF actually has recommended something on the 25th of November. That should have been put into place before coming here. That is the whole point of PNF. It's just pointless having PNF if the same paper is going to be circulated throughout the council for the second time running. That's what really gets to me now.
Okay, so
it is incorrect to do that. Hold on, one more point.
Go on.
Officer Horn actually said that churn or the 1.5 million. Sorry, I don't have a table now. I've moved premises. So I'm working on the laptop.
Out of your study.
That's still being hijacked, so I can't use that either. The 1.3 million, that's a year-end forecast. I totally accept that. If that's a way, then this table should indicate the variance up to 6 months and the potential turnover variance for the end of the year. This really doesn't make any sense to anyone. I was being extremely polite to the officers and
of course you're always polite, right. Councillor Malvagan. Of course you would be polite. Okay, that's a taken. Let me just a couple of things. One is I'm going to bring in Mr. Hone in a second. We've done the table bit. Okay, Councillor Hone has accepted that the table could be clearer and will make it clearer in future. But I do want to just pick up on the point you're making about whether the recommendations from the P&F committee were incorporated into the report. Can any one of the officers speak to that? I'm going to take that deafening silence as no. The Councillor Malvaganum's point is accepted, that the P&F made recommendations to the report before it went to the exec, and they appear not to have been included before this paper's gone into the exec. Okay, well, I have to say that that is unacceptable, all right? And we would want to see the paper come with the recommendations that have been made by the P&F. I agree completely with Councillor Malvaganum that that is the point of the scrutiny committees. All right, and the scrutiny committee is no more or less important than any other committee. All right, and that absolutely categorically needs to be that. Okay, Mr. Passion, can I just ask you if you would be happy to confirm that you're going to do whatever review is required, come back to us on why they weren't incorporated, and just make sure that the plan is that they will be incorporated in future?
Yes, Chairman, I just need to speak to the officers tomorrow. I think Mr. Payne would like to.
I see him. Okay. If I will say, Mr. Passion, as I said earlier when I was joking about Daniel, okay, sometimes the members see things a certain way and the officers take some stick for that, and then more often than not, the officers are able to explain what actually happened. And I absolutely praise the officers. If it has been done wrong or something's been missed, you're the first people to put your hands up and say, look, that was an error, you know, and that's it. So if we are misunderstanding, then fine. But if not, it needs to be corrected. So Mr. Payne.
Thank you, Chairman. The only point I was going to make was I'm just looking at the minutes from the P&F meeting, and there weren't any recommendations as such as part of the minutes. So I think it would be worthwhile picking up on the point that the chairman of P&F made with regard to the anomalies on the numerical information there, as to when that was actually made clear, because it's not included in the minutes, and I'm wondering whether that was actually made at the meeting or whether it was made separately to the officers.
And there's the very essence of what I just said. Okay, right? I'm absolutely happy for you to look into that. I'm sure Councillor Malvaginam will be happy to work with you to either point out where it should have been in the minutes, or where it was said and where he expected it to be in. Those meetings are taped, so those tapes are freely available to go through and confirm if it's been missed. Okay. Councillor Bates, I did see your hand up with questions on the paper.
Yes, it's not about that item, but it's going back to the Watch It item, and I appreciate what's been said earlier, but I've also gone back. It seems to be a tradition now that seems to be starting in the council of councils going back to old meeting papers. So the meeting that took place on the 4th of May 2020, and I've got in front of me what was said in that paper compared with what was said now. So the paper then on paragraph 1.15 referred to the anticipated cost being based on indicative quotes and information provided by the Lawn Tennis Association. What the paper here says is it mentions passing site visits. Well, there's nothing in the previous paper that mentioned that the site visits were passing ones. And that kind of, again, just I think we just need to be wary here about when, you know, the wording of reports and stuff like that.
Yeah,
and I think that's obviously something we need to be careful.
I take your point completely. Right. One of the things I didn't pick you up on, I thought it was just passing and it wasn't worth it, but I will just say it's important that the members make the decisions on all of the information. Okay. I believe that was a sweeping term in terms of all of the information, but certainly adequate information. And I didn't have it to hand the way you do, and I thank you for that. But I would have expected it to have been done, and I'm glad you confirmed exactly what I said, which was we went and got quotes. But that is not what's written in the paper now, as you say, in terms of passing. So I do think that is something that will be picked up on by the procurement department and finance and brought back. As I'm going to bring it to a close on this and just say that I think Councillor Jennings-Evans' comment is correct, that we note the paper, but are not prepared at this point to accept, I think it was small item 3, all right, that the capital programme be agreed in February that includes the Watch It tennis court capital budget. At this point, I think that needs to be brought back to the executive for future discussion when we have another run at the paper. Okay, is that sufficient? Let me ask Mr. Payne, is that sufficient in terms of the wording for us to get over the conversation that we've just had, the discussion we've just had?
Yeah, I believe it will be. I think we'll confirm the wording with you afterwards and make sure you're happy with that, and we'll put it in the summary that goes out tomorrow, Chairman.
Okay. All right. And just before we, I'll ask for the vote. Are we happy, members of the executive, to resolve 1, 2, and 3 with the slight amendment in 3 that I've just suggested? Okay, good. We are. Okay. And I just want to say, now that that's finished, it was mentioned that the London Road Rec tennis courts were resurfaced in St Michael's, and I'm the ward member for St Michael's. I would just like it noted that that work was done a long time before I became leader. All right, so it wasn't decided that that was a priority because of I happen to represent St Michael's, although I was very grateful that it was done. Okay, next item 8. That's Councillor Lewis again.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. Well, this is the Treasury Management Midyear Report for 2021. So advise members of the executive on the performance of 2021 as of the 30th of September 2020, illustrates compliance to date with Treasury Management indicators for 2021. Basically, it says the Council is complying with all Treasury Management indicators, following the advice of our Treasury advisors, Arlene Close, and their review is attached at Annex D. 31st of March, our capital financing requirement was determined to be 196 million, a figure that we can't exceed. And on the 30th of September, our total borrowing was 170 million. Our borrowing position is detailed on the table at paragraph 4.1. As currently short-term borrowing has lower rates than long-term borrowing, it's more cost-effective for us to borrow on short-term loans. However, to reduce risk, the Council has entered into a 50 million forward-starting loans, with half starting this financial year and the second half in the next financial year. Other borrowing options available are discussed in paragraphs 4.5 to 4.10. With regards to investment, in the early part of the year, we received £23 million worth of government funding, which was temporarily invested with the Debt Management Office. As of the 30th of September, 15 million of this had been dispersed. Of the Council held funds, the average balance has been £20 million. Our half-year investment position is shown in the table in paragraph 4.13. Of note is paragraph 4.15, where deposit rates for the debt management account deposit facility fell below 0%. This is why, as detailed in paragraph 418, we have been requested to temporarily increase for 6 months the limit of investment we can make on money market funds from 10 million to 50 million. Justification for this is, as said in paragraph 419, essentially, SIPFA code and government guidance require the Council to invest its funds prudently. So at least we will get a return on our funds rather than actually paying someone to look after them. Council investments of the 30th of September are also listed at Annex A. The estimated return on investments at the end of the year is expected to be a shortfall of £28,000 against the budget. This is due to low interest rates, as outlined in Annex D to the report. Compliance with the Treasury Management indicators are detailed in Annexes B and C. We've been asked to note and comment on the report and to approve the temporary change to the Council's Treasury Management strategy. Thank you.
Okay, there may be some questions on this. Do you have any questions? No? Okay. All right. I would just like assurance from yourself, Councillor Lewis, or from Mr. Hone. So we're moving into negative now, where if we have money overnight or something, then we're actually being charged for people storing it for us. Right? And in terms of moving it to the money market, and I don't make no bones about it, I am not an investor and financial wizard, but in terms of risk, how would we quantify or describe the risk of that extra 5 million limit moving to the money market?
Well, I'll pass this to Mr. Hone, but in paragraph 413, short-term cash equivalents gave us a return of 0.2% up to the 30th of September. So, well, I'll pass over to Mr. Hone. He can probably expand on that.
Thank you, Councillor.
I'm really not so much about return. It's about risk. And when I hear money market, I'm sorry, I just personally, I hear bank account and I hear money market. I just am looking for comfort in terms of risk.
Thank you, Councillor Lewis, and through you, Chair. We only lend to absolutely cast iron intermediaries. So, for instance, counterparties, I should say. So, for instance, other local authorities and very well-known high street banks. We only deal in sterling. We don't deal in foreign currencies. There's no foreign currency risk. So we are dealing with absolutely the most copper-bottomed of intermediate counterparties. Despite what you hear in vernacular about local authorities going bust, a local authority can't go bust. So when we lend to another local authority, that's virtually zero risk. Where we're getting negative rates is actually when we give our money back to the government. So that's the government's own will hold local authorities' money for 1 or 2 days or 3 or 4 days, and for that they have been charging just slightly under 0%. In the last week or so, it's gone back to 0%. But you know, so it's not costing lots of money. But wherever we can, we ought to be looking to make some return, very modest returns, but by lending to absolutely the top ticket counterparties.
All right, thank you. Okay, all I can say is what a strange world we live in. Okay, right. Councillor Malvaginam.
Thank you, Leader. This actually is specifically to Councillor Horn. I'm not too sure whether Councillor Lewis will be able to, not Councillor Horn, Officer Horn. I also refer to you as a councillor like the Leader.
Yeah, but if I may say so, Councillor Malvaginam, feel free to direct your questions to Councillor Lewis and he'll decide whether he'll answer it or Mr. Horn will.
Okay, in which case I'll ask Councillor Lewis first. Councillor Lewis, if you don't mind telling me, I read an article recently regarding I believe it was a Essex County Council or Essex Council was unable to place even their cash with other councils. How would it affect us? I mean, have you had a look at it? Have you had a chat with Arlington Close?
Yeah, actually, I think I will pass this one to Martin. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lewis, and through you, Chairman. Yeah, I mean, that's exactly the point that you know, there's where we can, we will always you know, lend where we can make some return. But there are days, because don't forget we're doing this every single day, we're making our book every day, and when we're in surplus we have to find somebody that will take our money overnight or for a couple of days. And there are occasions when actually there is no other local authority or bank that is particularly needful of the money for the next day or 2 or 3. In that case, we have no option but to put it with the government, because we're not allowed to hold more than a relatively small sum, if you like, overnight in our own bank account. So that money gets looked after by the government's own fund manager, but literally for nothing, and in the last month or so, actually at a very small fee. So we're actually paying people to look after our money, which in my 40+ years in local government finance, I've never come across that before. Thank you.
Okay then, thank you. All right. Right, so the executive, we're being asked to note and comment on the report. Okay, unless there's anything screaming urgent, are we happy to note the report? Okay, we are. Good. Okay, thank you. All right, that brings us to appointments to Surrey Leaders Group outside bodies. So I was going to say Mrs. Councillor Galliford there, but she's just left to go to another meeting because I believe she's on this. So we are being asked to consider whether to make a nomination to a vacancy on the Surrey and Borders Partnership NHS Foundation Mental Health Foundation Trust, one of the Surrey Leaders Group outside bodies. In discussion with Councillor Malvaginam, I would like to nominate the Councillor Perry as our nomination for this. I've asked Councillor Perry just for a little bit of background. I think we all know in terms of he was the mayor before and did an excellent job. He's a qualified management consultant, has been involved as an entrepreneur in starting and building successful local businesses. He's been a business advisor for the government agency Business Link. He's obviously a borough councillor since 2015. He's been very involved in supporting local charities, particularly the charity Round Table and its senior branch 41 Club, and has been involved in raising hundreds of thousands of pounds for charity. served as mayor, as I said, during 2019-20, and visited the offices of the trust, and has a particular interest in what they do and the mental health side, and he recognises the importance of the task at hand and contributing to the development of the trust. And he would be very happy to be put forward. I'm not sure if we need a seconder, but I should imagine I have a lot of people are happy to second Councillor Perry. Okay, I see a lot of hands up there. I don't believe there are any other nominees for this. What I would say, I think Councillor Gallagher is already on there. So unless there are any comments about our nominee, I'll just look for a show of hands from the executive that they're happy for that to be Councillor Perry. Okay, that's unanimous. Thank you. All right. I believe it is a nomination, so it's not a case of he's automatically on that Board of Trustees. I think they'll probably do some kind of vote for that, but I wish him well in trying to become it. Right, and we're left on the last item, the urgent action agenda item 10. Okay, the executive is advised to note the urgent action taken under the scheme of delegation of function of officers. All right, this was to do with the fact that legislation was brought out in April by the government in order how to deal with the COVID crisis. And then in November, that legislation was scrapped and replaced with new legislation. And we needed to get on with doing the tasks that the council needed to do in terms of supporting the community and getting business grants out, etc. So the urgent action was signed off. We're just being asked to note that, but I'm happy if anyone needs to comment. Okay. Councillor Duggan.
I'm happy to comment given it's my paper, leader. So yeah, the only comment I would make is it was a fantastic idea by the economic development team, and I thank them for bringing it forward. As far as I'm aware, we are the only borough that's tried to do this. Everyone sat on their hands and waited until back end of lockdown. What this has enabled us to do is put a relatively small scheme out to businesses, but to enable them to claim funds immediately rather than wait until the fuller scheme is rolled out. We've had 16 successful applications already, not in truth as many as we'd perhaps hoped we would have, but nonetheless, there are 16 businesses who have benefited from this urgent action, and I believe the officer team should be congratulated for that, not just in economic development, but undoubtedly in Robert Fox's team too, who will have made it all happen.
Good, thank you.
I was trying to find some better words, but couldn't.
But
thank you for letting me talk. Thank you for letting me comment on my paper, though.
That's right. Now you know why I did the paper. Yeah. Okay. Councillor Bates.
Yeah, can I just clarify then, this urgent action is to provide grants to businesses for running costs?
Yeah, so the scheme itself is the funding scheme that the government brought out, and I can't remember, works out at something like £20 per head of population in the borough. And that fund, so it works out about 1.7 million to support businesses due to the second lockdown. The government were not massively quick in bringing out the guidance to enable councils to disperse that money. I actually couldn't even say whether we've got, I'm looking at Mrs. Livingston, whether we've actually got that guidance. It comes in the way normally of an FAQ from government. But we'll then put the full scheme out. But yes, it's to enable businesses to claim for funds that will allow them to cover some of the costs that they will still incur whilst having no revenue. And as I say, a full scheme, taking into account what we've already given out on phase 1, will be rolled out as and when we are ready.
Okay, so just as a follow-up, I'm sure that this is fairly obvious, but for members of the public who may be watching, why are we giving businesses grants, but we're giving charities loans?
Because the government have funded businesses with grants and haven't funded charities with loans.
Thank you. I'm sure that everybody will be publicising that in due course.
Doesn't take much publicising, Councillor Bates. It's been a fact ever since they introduced the loan scheme.
Yeah.
We can go back and ask, or feel free to go and ask Mr. Starmer if he'd like to have that changed.
Okay, and on that note, all right. So we're being asked to note that paper. Are members of the executive, are we happy to do so? Yeah, okay, that's good. Okay, that's the last item on the agenda. Just before 8 o'clock, all right. So I'd just like to thank everybody once again. I know I've done this on several meetings, but it's the last one of the year. So in case we don't have, sorry, Councillor Wheeler, go on.
I was going to say, no, it's not. We've got one tomorrow night and one the following night for some of us.
Sorry, I meant executive.
Okay.
Yeah, so I was going to say, just to the people who love coming to the executive as well as the executive members. Okay, thank you very much again, and I will see you later. Thank you.
Leader, as Councillor Wheeler says, we have the most important one of the whole council on Thursday night. Not that we're promoting it, are we, Councillor Wheeler?
She undersold it there, Councillor Hawkins. Yeah, the most important one.
We get more views.
Right, okay.